They were already laughing before she reached a school gate. Not loudly, not cruelly at first, but in the careless way people laugh when they believe someone else doesn't matter. The kind of laughter that slips out without guilt, without thought. Margaret Hill heard it anyway. At 72, her hearing wasn't as sharp as it once had been. But she had lived long enough to recognize mockery, even when it tried to disguise itself as humor. She kept her eyes forward and adjusted her grip on the small cloth bag she carried, the same one she had used for years. The stitching, frayed but strong. Her shoes were what drew the attention, old brown leather flats. Cracked at the toes, carefully polished but worn thin by decades of walking. They had belonged to her late husband. He had bought them for her the year he got his first promotion. Proud that he could finally afford something nice. She wore them now not because she couldn't buy new ones, but because every step in them felt like walking with him again. That was not something the parents standing near the gate understood. They only saw an old woman who didn't belong, who looked out of place among polished cars and neatly pressed coats. One woman leaned toward another and whispered, "Do they even let people like her in here?" Another snorted quietly. A man glanced down at Margaret's shoes and shook his head, amused. Margaret felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not stop walking. She had promised her grandson she would come. Promises to her were sacred. The school building loomed ahead, red bricks softened by ivy and time. Inside, the hallway buzzed with the restless energy of children and the polite impatience of adults waiting for the assembly to begin. Margaret moved slowly, careful not to trip, her shoes making a soft, uneven sound against the polished floor. She found a seat near the back of the auditorium, folding her hands in her lap the way she always did when she was nervous. Around her, parents chatted about grades, sports, and college prospects. No one spoke to her. She was invisible again, just as she had been for much of her life. She didn't mind invisibility the way she once had. It was a quiet place, a place where memories could live without interruption. She thought of her grandson, Daniel, standing somewhere backstage with his classmates, probably fidgeting, probably nervous. She smiled to herself. Daniel had always been shy, always more comfortable with books than crowds. When his mother, Margaret's daughter, had died years earlier, Margaret had stepped in without hesitation. She learned how to pack lunches again, how to braid hair, how to sit through parent-teacher meetings where she felt too old, too out of place, too tired. But she went anyway. Love did not ask if you were ready. It simply arrived and demanded you show up. The murmurs grew louder as the auditorium filled. Margaret noticed a few glances thrown her way again, eyes dropping to her shoes and back up with poorly hidden judgment. One woman whispered, "Those shoes," and laughed softly. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment and took a slow breath. She had survived worse things than whispers. She had survived losing her husband, burying her daughter, raising a grieving child on a fixed income. Shoes were just shoes, or so she told herself. The lights dimmed, and the chatter faded as the principal stepped onto the stage. He was a tall man with silver hair and a calm presence that settled the room. Margaret recognized him immediately, though she doubted he recognized her. Or perhaps he did, she wasn't sure. The principal smiled at the audience and began speaking about community, about values, about the importance of kindness and perseverance. Margaret listened, nodding along, her thoughts drifting back through years of early mornings and late nights. She remembered sewing Daniel's uniforms by hand because it was cheaper. She remembered skipping meals so he could eat seconds. She remembered the way her husband's shoes had fit her feet perfectly after they were broken in, how she wore them on difficult days like armor. She adjusted them now, pressing her heels into the worn soles as if drawing strength from the past. Then the principal paused. He looked out over the audience, his gaze sweeping slowly across the rows. When his eyes reached the back, they stopped. Margaret felt it before she understood it, that strange sensation of being seen when you least expect it. He smiled, not politely, but warmly, and she felt a flicker of unease. Why was he looking at her? He cleared his throat. "Before we continue," he said, his voice steady, "there's someone here today I'd like to acknowledge." The room shifted, people straightened in their seats. Curious, Margaret's heart began to pound. The principal took a step forward. "Some of you may have noticed an elderly woman sitting quietly in the back," he continued. A few heads turned. Margaret's hands tightened in her lap. She felt suddenly exposed, every wrinkle, every crack in her shoes magnified under invisible lights. "Her name is Margaret Hill," the principal said, "and long before this building had new floors and smartboards, before many of us even thought about education the way we do today, she was teaching." A hush fell over the room. Margaret's breath caught. Teaching, he couldn't be talking about her. She had never been a teacher, not officially. She had worked in a library for years. Quietly, anonymously, she had read to children, helped them find books, encouraged them when they struggled. But a teacher, the principal continued. Margaret Hill was the librarian at this very school for over 30 years. She retired quietly, without ceremony, without applause. During those years, she helped generations of children learn to read, to love stories, to believe they were capable of more than they thought. Murmurs rippled through the audience. People glanced at Margaret again, Differently this time, the laughter from earlier evaporated, replaced by confusion, then something closer to embarrassment. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. She had never expected this. She had never wanted recognition. She had simply done what needed to be done. The principal smiled gently. "Many of you don't know this," he said, "but when our reading program was at risk of being cut decades ago, Margaret used her own savings to keep it alive. She never told anyone. She didn't want praise. She wanted children to have books." The room was completely silent now. Margaret stared at the floor, her vision blurring. She remembered those days, the envelope she slid across the desk, the quiet agreement with the then principal, the relief she felt knowing the program would survive another year. She remembered wearing those same shoes to work every day, because they were comfortable and reliable, because her husband had believed in her enough to buy them. The principal's voice softened. "Today, Margaret is here because her grandson is receiving an award for academic excellence. And if you ask me," he said, "those worn shoes she is wearing tell a story far richer than anything new and polished ever could." A ripple of applause began, hesitant at first, then growing louder, stronger, until the entire room was standing. Margaret froze. She didn't know what to do with applause. It felt too big, too undeserved. Tears spilled freely now, sliding down her cheeks as she pressed a hand to her mouth. People who had mocked her earlier were clapping too, their faces flushed with regret. Some avoided her eyes. Others looked at her with something like awe. The woman who had laughed whispered, "I had no idea," to no one in particular. Margaret stood slowly, her knees trembling, and gave a small, shy nod. She wished her husband were there. She wished her daughter were there. She wished Daniel could see her now. As if summoned by the thought, the curtain behind the stage parted, and Daniel walked out with his classmates. He spotted his grandmother immediately, his face lighting up when he saw her standing. Tears on her cheeks, the room applauding. His confusion turned to pride in an instant. The principal finished speaking and called Daniel's name. As Daniel accepted his award, he looked out at Margaret and she saw in his eyes what made every sacrifice worthwhile: love, gratitude, understanding. After the ceremony, parents approached her one by one. Some apologized awkwardly, some thanked her sincerely, some simply shook her hand, their grip lingering as if they wanted to hold on to a piece of her quiet strength. Margaret accepted it all with gentle grace. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the pavement. She stood near the gate again, the same place where laughter had followed her earlier, but now the air felt different. Daniel ran up to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Grandma," he said, voice thick, "why didn't you ever tell me?" She smiled, brushing his hair back. "Some things don't need to be said," she replied. "They just need to be done." As they walked to the bus stop together, her shoes tapping softly against the ground, Margaret felt lighter than she had in years. Not because she had been praised, but because she had been understood. The world had finally seen what those shoes carried, and that was enough.